We've been talking about how important it is not to allow ourselves to be so distracted by the insane sayings and doings of Donald Trump and Russia and the entire thing that we forget about the crazy stuff that the Republican-controlled House and Senate are doing. And it's continuing, okay? The corrupt and deplorable Trump administration continues to make headlines for everything ranging from ignorance to potential crimes. But meanwhile, Republicans keep passing disastrous, truly disastrous bills. Here's some of the latest utterly insane bills that have been introduced by Republicans, some of which have passed one or both houses of Congress, okay? We have H.R. 861, introduced by Florida Republican Matt Gaetz, which would abolish the Environmental Protection Agency, okay? We have this bill up on the screen for you, and this is the committee led by Congressman Lamar Smith, who fought hard against investigations of Exxon's climate fraud. And the committee recently retweeted a Breitbart article that denied climate change, okay? They retweet Breitbart articles that are completely non-science based, and they have passed a bill which would completely abolish the EPA. That bill is only in its beginning stages. Then we have our buddy from Iowa, Congressman Steve King, who introduced H.R. 6119, the Choices in Education Act. This would get rid of all federal regulation of schools, so the Department of Education would just be giving grants to states to fund voucher programs. Disaster. And by the way, to get this funding, states would have to allow parents to enroll their kids in any public or private school in the state. It would loosen homeschooling regulations, and it would also get rid of healthy food regulations in public schools. Even with the regulations we have, there are some schools that have some really, really unhealthy food. Then we have another bill, H.R. 899, introduced by Congressman Thomas Massie, which would get rid of the Department of Education altogether. Forget about limiting their power. Let's just get rid of the department altogether, called Termination of the Department of Education. There's one upside to that bill, Pat, which is if you get rid of the Department of Education, Betsy DeVos is gone, since there'd be no department. Is that a silver lining to look at?
That was the whole idea behind putting Tom Price in charge of Health and Human Services,
right?
Putting Rick Perry in charge of Energy, and now Betsy DeVos for Education.
Yeah, they're against the departments.
Yeah, might as well.
We also have HJR 69. Okay, this is House Joint Resolution 69. This one actually made it to the House and was passed a few weeks ago. Now looking at what's going on in the Senate, this one would remove many rules on recreational hunting in Alaskan wildlife refuges. The bill would allow people to kill black or brown bear cubs and their mothers. If you're hunting for sport, why do you need to kill the cubs? It would allow you to kill any bear using traps or snares. Again, if you're hunting for sport, what's the sport, Pat, in using a snare to trap and kill a bear? It would also allow you to kill bears from aircraft, reminds me of Sarah Palin, and it would also allow you to kill wolves and coyotes during certain times of year, which is sort of like the least controversial part of this. I really don't get it. What is the sport in doing some of this stuff?
I have no idea. I don't even know if this is too political in a sense, because I don't know if this really divides Republicans and Democrats.
It's happening. There have also been many attempts made to repeal Obamacare, but we have a new bill to repeal Obamacare introduced by Congressman Bill Flores, which might actually be the first one that a president in the White House would sign. This is H.R. 370. This bill is still in committee. We have from Congresswoman Diane Black from Tennessee, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2017, which is still in committee. That bill has 133 co-sponsors, all Republicans, a quarter of the entire House. Remember that already, Planned Parenthood can't use federal funds for abortions, but if this bill is passed, there will be more Planned Parenthood clinics and other similar clinics across the country that would have to close their doors. They'd have to stop providing a large array of health services to people who otherwise can't afford them. And a lot of those services, basically all of them, have nothing to do with abortion. Diabetes testing, cholesterol testing, vaccinations, breast exams, STD tests, birth control. And at the clinics that do stay open, prices will skyrocket. This will affect low-income people. This will sort of defeat the purpose of Planned Parenthood, which is probably what Republicans want to do. We also have proposed by Republicans the National Right to Work Act. This is H.R. 785. It still is in a House committee seeking approval, introduced last month by Congressman Steve King, same guy who introduced that school voucher bill I told you about earlier. This would prevent unions from collecting fair share fees from non-union employees. So basically, they can freeload off of unions that are legally required to represent them. Or what will actually be the effect of this in many cases, which is obviously the goal of these Republicans. Many unions will have to shut down and no longer be able to work for fair wages or adequate benefits, et cetera. One more to mention here, the Mobilizing Against Sanctuary Cities Act. This was proposed by Congressman Lou Barletta. This would punish cities that protect undocumented immigrants. This would affect over 400 localities, including New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Detroit, a very, very long list. We also have the strangely named Prenatal Non-Discrimination Act of 2017, introduced by Republican Trent Franks. This is awaiting review by the Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Justice. This would criminalize abortions performed on the basis of the sex of the fetus. Of course, the real question is, how do you know? Under the law, healthcare providers that, quote, suspect that the patient is seeking a sex-selective abortion would be required to notify authorities. How do you enforce this? How do you enforce this? And just wanting to know the sex of your fetus might become suspect, especially if the pregnancy is unwanted to begin with. So Republicans all of a sudden, I guess, fighting for gender equality. I'm kidding, by the way. It's absolutely bogus. This new Trump presidency, Pat, has done two things. Number one, it has caused so much insanity that people are paying less attention to what Republicans are doing, but it has also emboldened House and Senate Republicans to do really horrible things that we should be paying attention to.
And I think there's this idea that Trump right now is kind of a liability and a headache for Republicans. That may be true down the road when they're looking for re-election efforts in 2018 and 2020. But for right now, they can do whatever they want. And people who even are media literate and pay attention to the news every day, who watch the Sunday morning talk shows and read all the articles, they're not even getting this information.
Because media is mostly not covering it. That's why. And yeah, Trump is providing cover for the more pragmatic and effective Republicans in the House and Senate. You've got to be aware of this stuff. This is the stuff where you actually can call your representatives.